Hey, it's Mike Hambright. Welcome back for another Flip Nerd VIP interview show. Today I have with me a good friend of mine, Arnie Abramson. He's a leading national expert at purchasing properties, the tax sale, and has tremendous overall experience in the real estate investing space. It's a very interesting topic to talk about tax sales, and not a lot of people that really know how to do this right. Arnie's the guy. So before we get started today, let's take a moment to recognize our sponsors. RealtyMogul.com is an online marketplace for real estate investing, connecting borrowers and capital from accredited and institutional investors. Get a rehab loan fast and close in as little as 10 days. Rates start as low as 9%. We'd also like to thank National Real Estate Insurance Group, the nation's leading provider of insurance to the residential real estate investor market. From individual properties to large-scale investors, National Real Estate Insurance Group is ready to serve you. Please note, the views and opinions expressed by the individuals in this program do not necessarily reflect those of FlipNerd.com or any of its partners, advertisers, or affiliates. Please consult professionals before making any investment or tax decisions, as real estate investing can be risky. Hey, Arnie, good to have you on the show.
Well, thank you. I'm honored to be here.
Oh, thanks. I'm honored to have you. So we've been friends for a long time. We've been running in some of the same circles, although I don't personally invest in tax sales. There's a lot of things that I don't do, but it's a really interesting topic. Why don't you take a second to kind of, before we get into the nuts and bolts of buying at Sherriff sales and tax lien sales and things like that, why don't you introduce yourself and let everybody know a little bit more about you?
Well, okay. As you know, we operate in Texas, and even though I was born in Shreveport, I consider that the capital of East Texas. So that'll work. But I've been here since 1990, and in my former life, I was a financial planner. And before that, or during that period, I also worked for a real estate company that did public offerings of commercial real estate. And that's where I really got my first taste of real estate.
Okay.
Got here in 1992, I did my first tax sale in Dallas. And in fact, did 10 of them in the first 12 months.
Wow.
It was because it's an intricate process, and then that was before there was any kind of real information on the internet, so we had to do a lot of legwork, and it was entirely different. But I was very fortunate. I met someone who had just moved to town who had experience in tax sales, and but he didn't have the time. I had the time and didn't know what to do, so we formed a joint venture and operated that way for 2 or 3 years, and that's really how I learned about it, was by doing and being mentored, and it was quite an experience. So,
yeah. And you know what's funny? Sometimes when I hear a year now, like 1992, my first thought is, that was just 1992, and it's like, wait a minute, that was almost 25 years ago.
I know.
Time is flying.
Usually, when I'm talking to somebody, I say that was before you were born.
Yeah, yeah. So you've got a lot of, and all along you become an expert in tax sales. I mean, you've been doing this ever since you started,
Well, I did it for several years, and then the market started to change. Back then, you could only work one county at a time because, and it was really literally you would go down to Dallas County and we'd form a circle around the sheriff, and he would have 6 or 7 properties, and that was it. Then the out-of-state investors started coming in and driving up the prices, and so we kind of let it cool for a while, and I started to do a lot of other things. I did foreclosures, buying HUD foreclosures, VA foreclosures, and did that for many years. Then when the economy started to turn around, and not too long ago, I said, you know what, this is time to get back into this because there are going to be a lot of tax foreclosures.
Yeah.
And that's when I kind of rededicated and got reacquainted with the tax sales in terms of what information is available online now. I mean, it was incredible.
Right.
And we even we're covering the whole state now.
Yeah. Well, before we get into too many details, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about what that even means? Saying we're throwing around the phrase tax sale. Why don't you talk a little bit about what that means? Which is pretty standard across the country, but I know there's some differences in other states as well. Just kind of explain the general opportunity that exists for real estate investors.
Well, as a little segue into this, I have to tell you, Not long ago, I was watching television, and they were doing Gone with the Wind again.
Yeah.
And I decided I would watch it for about 10 minutes. And it happened to be the time when Scarlett, after the war, Scarlett goes to find Rhett Butler, and she pulls down the curtains to make a dress to be presentable. And she finds him, and she says, Rhett, you've got to help me. I need $300 because the sheriff is coming to foreclose on Tara.
Yeah.
So there we are with the tax sales back in the Civil War.
Yeah.
And that was the example. I wanted to get that clip. But today, the tax sales in the country, the states are divided about 50-50. About half of the states are what they call tax lien states. When you go to the auction there, you're bidding on the lien that was created for the taxes they owe. You're not bidding on the house. You're bidding for the lien. It may start off at 18%. You'll say, okay, I'm going to bid 18%. I'll take over this lien for 18% interest. The next guy will say, well, I'll do it for 17. And the next guy for 14. So the guy who will take the lowest interest rate winds up buying the lien. And the lien may be $800, $2,000, whatever it is they owe in taxes. Those are tax lien states. That does not apply to Texas.
So before you go further, so if somebody buys the lien, let's say they buy $1,000 lien, and just to keep the math simple at 10%, what is it that they're getting? Because the person is clearly not paying the lien, which is why there's a problem in the first place. What are they getting, and is it ultimately to just try to get the house anyway?
Well, it's not necessarily that they're not paying it. They will get it, and they will get the interest payments. If they don't, then they have to go and foreclose on the property.
Okay.
And take it over.
Okay.
And that's the tax lien state. And that's the ones that all the gurus are talking about on the internet. When they talk about you can do it from home, it's easy, you don't have to know anything, you don't have to look at the properties. Those are what they're talking about.
Right.
And you must understand that none of that applies to Texas. As a matter of fact, 4 of the big gurus of tax liens out there, when they want to buy for their personal accounts in Texas, they come to us because they know that it's entirely different.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is a nice segue into Texas, right?
Yeah.
Okay. The other half of the states are what they call tax deed states. And in those auctions, you're not buying the lien, you're actually buying the property. And you get a sheriff's deed or a constable deed. Now, Texas happens to be the best of all the states because, number one, it has some features that some of the other states of tax deed states don't have that apply to tax lien states. For example, if we buy a property at the tax sale in Texas, the owner that lost it has up to 2 years that he can reclaim it or redeem it. And this redemption feature is unusual in tax deed states. Now, if he does redeem it in the first 12 months, he has to pay the buyer his cost plus 25%. And if it's in the second year, it's plus 50%. And what makes Texas different is that's the highest rate in the country. And unlike other states that have redemptions, it's not prorated. It's cumulative. In other words, if I buy the property today and they redeem it tomorrow, I get the full year's 25% penalty.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah. Now, the reality is, and on the internet, again, when they're talking about tax lien states, they're talking about, most of them get redeemed. Well, in tax deed states, most of them do not get redeemed.
Right.
And there's some reasons for that, but usually if they can't afford to pay their taxes, how can they afford to pay you what you pay for it plus the penalty?
Yeah.
So about 1 in 10 get redeemed in Texas as an average overall.
Okay.
Now, our average is a little less than that. It's like 1 in 5, a little better, because we don't buy vacant lots, which bring your averages down.
I see. Okay. So the circumstance is generally going to be that somebody just has unpaid taxes and the city wants their money at some point, and so they have a sheriff's sale, they have a tax sale.
Yeah, here's the process. Any one of the taxing entities can initiate the suit for taxes. It can be the city, it can be the county, it can be the school district. Those are the 3 main ones.
Yeah.
But it also could be the hospital or a junior college or a mud district or anything. Usually it's the 3, the city, the county, or the school district. And they can initiate that lawsuit just for the taxes owed to them. For example, one of the law firms might represent the city and a different law firm may represent the county. And that happens quite often. And so they can sue for the taxes just owed to them, or they can include all the others in it themselves. So when you're looking at a tax sale, you want to see who's doing the suing, who the plaintiff is, and if it has the magic phrase "et al." after it, which means that would include all of them,
right?
The taxing entities. So once they initiate that suit, and they are required by law to notify anyone who has an interest in that property.
Yep.
And sometimes that can take 2 or 3 or 4 years,
right,
because you have heirs that have to be notified, etc. They have to notify them, and then if they still don't make their payments, then they will go to court, and it is a judicial process, which is what differentiates it from the trustee sales, where the mortgage company is foreclosed.
Right.
That mortgage company can just foreclose. Here they cannot. It's a judicial process, and there is a lawsuit, and that lien that is created then supersedes all other liens except for government liens. For example, it'll wipe out or extinguish any mortgages. So if you buy it at the tax sale, you're going to get it free and clear of any mortgages.
Wow.
So now, the buyer at the sale assumes all the rights that the county had, or whoever's doing the suing. In tax lien states, that means they have possession of those liens. In tax deed states, they now have possession of the house. Now, in Texas, once that is sold, the ex-owner has zero rights, period, except that right of redemption. He does not have a right of possession. He does not have a right to collect rent. He has the right of redeem it only.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how often does a lender actually get wiped out? It seems like if it takes a long time because of the judicial process to notify everybody, that the lender probably has some time to protect their interests by taking it. I mean, presumably if they're not paying their taxes, they're probably maybe not paying their mortgage payments either. So could they essentially, because they can foreclose, sounds like much faster than what a sheriff sale would be, so they could potentially preempt the tax sale by foreclosing on the house?
Mike, that's a great question, really, and that is exactly correct.
Yeah.
Let's take Collin County.
We didn't plan that, by the way.
We didn't. No,
yeah.
that was just. Hey, you're right there. Most of the sales, most of the properties that go to sales do not have mortgages for that very reason.
Yeah.
Because if people have a mortgage on a house, most of the time they're going to have the mortgage company escrow for taxes.
Right.
As long as they make their mortgage payments, the mortgage company will make the payments for taxes. Now, there are some people who insist, no, I don't want to escrow them, and sometimes they occur and they show up on the sale.
Yeah.
Many times it's after, especially in the lower price houses where maybe people have been in there for 20 or 30 years, there's no more mortgage on it. Right. And that happens a lot. So having said that, generally speaking, most of the properties that come up on the tax sale do not have mortgages because they would have gone to the trustee sale first. However, there are some that slip through the cracks.
Yeah.
For example, in September, we bought a house that had a mortgage in Hunt County. And maybe the mortgage company just didn't want to go to Commerce, Texas, where the house was, to check it out.
Yeah.
But we bought this house for $90,000, and it was a $300,000 house.
Wow.
Now, the mortgage company redeemed it. And they are more likely to, if there is a mortgage, than the owner. Because after all, if they did an 80-20 to get into the house, the mortgage company has more skin in the game.
Yeah.
And they're more likely to redeem than the individual.
So what happened? They redeemed. They came back and paid you.
Well, actually,
$90,000 plus 25%.
Well, we buy houses only for our investors because we don't want to have any conflict of interest.
Yeah. So
our investors' total out of pocket on that house was $104,000, and they got back $132,000 in 52 days.
Okay.
Now, let me hasten to add, that is not normal. That is not what you'd expect. That's an aberration, a good one.
Yeah.
But it happens every now and then.
Right. Yeah. So what trends do you see with the economy getting good and bad, over time? What trends do you see in the tax sales? Are you more likely to see them in bad economies versus good, or I mean, what are your general thoughts on that?
Well, naturally, when the economy is going downhill, you're going to have more foreclosures,
Yeah.
all kinds. And however, what we're seeing is a very, very steady amount. I mean, Harris County, for example, in Houston, that's one of the larger counties. And they're so big that they don't have just one tax sale every month. They have 8 precincts, and each precinct has their own sale.
Oh, wow.
At the same time, at the same place, and it's a zoo.
Right.
And they, for example, this month they're offering 418 properties for sale.
Okay.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's probably the economy is getting better, but remember this. I mean, it's changing. It's getting better, and we may not have as many. But remember this: that more people are moving to Texas than from anywhere. The fundamentals in Texas as a real estate spot is just great.
Right.
And there are articles all over the place saying how we as a nation and as a state are becoming a nation of renters.
Yeah.
Because the mortgage companies are still getting a little stingy. So, where do we as investors want to be? We want to be the guys who are renting it to these people coming in from out of state.
Right.
So this is just another source of where to buy houses below retail value.
And aside from that example that you gave about the house that was a $90,000 house, I mean, typically these are lower grade houses anyway that tend to be more of like typically probably my guess is more like a C-class rental property, right?
Well, they really are all over the board. During that same month that we got the one in Hunt County, we bought one for $5,400. In Tarrant County, that's rented for $500 a month.
Yeah.
I mean, that's incredible. Yeah. And by the way, Mike, for the first time, this is the big one for me. We bid on a house last month where the appraisal value was $832,000.
Oh, wow.
Now, we did not get it.
Yeah.
But somebody did for $375,000.
Wow.
But you can't go into the house to inspect it. So, maybe it needed $100,000.
Yeah.
So
what you mentioned before, I think maybe you said this before we started the show, you're talking about the percentage of houses that typically sell at the auction. What would prevent a house from selling? I mean, does the bidding typically start at $1? I mean, it starts wherever somebody opens it up, but are there reserves on these where that keep some houses from selling?
Another good question, unrehearsed.
Yeah.
The bidding starts.
I'm full of it, Arnie. Everybody my wife tells me I'm full of it. I think she means good questions.
I think so too. The bidding starts with the amount of taxes owed.
I see.
So if they owe $1, yes, that's where it would start. Now, if the taxes owed plus any legal fees and that type of stuff, and usually they publish the minimum bid. Now, there is no reserve. I mean, that's where the bidding starts. And the house that I told you we bought for $5,400, no one else bid on it. We just yelled out minimum at the very end and got it. And it was a classic case where it looked horrible from the outside, but if you look closely, the bones of the house were pretty good. And there were people living there. So it was one of those aberrational things that work.
Yeah.
But so the bidding starts with the taxes owed. Now, having said that, here's what you have to understand. Remember we said earlier that it's a judicial process and you get a judgment for the taxes. Well, from that point on, it could take a year, 6 months, a year, 2 years, 4 years before it gets to the tax sale. Because again, they have to notify every person who had an interest in that property. But meanwhile, since that judgment, more taxes are accruing that are due. So the bid, when you buy it at the tax sale, and it's going to pay off whatever you purchase it for. Let's say they owe $8,000 in taxes, and you buy it for $20,000. $8,000 of that $20,000 will go to pay the taxes. But then there are taxes that have accrued since then. We call them post-judgment taxes, and you have to pay those as well, but not necessarily that same day, just before January 31st of the following year.
The buyer has to pay those.
The buyer, yeah. So those are not, they don't tell you about that on the internet, but that's one of the things, that you need to know.
Right.
So that's part of the research that you have to do.
Yeah. So what do they do with houses that don't sell? I mean, that that are, I mean, you know, and I know in this town here, we get opportunities to buy houses all the time that, you know, once the house is fixed up, it might be worth 50 or 60,000, but it needs 60 or 70,000 in work to get it there, and you wouldn't take it for free. So I'm sure that happens in the tax sale space as well. But what happened? I mean, what does the city do? I mean, ultimately, are they willing to negotiate on their taxes, or can they even do that legally?
You know what? You've been talking to somebody in my staff to ask this question.
No, I haven't.
Got to.
I'm just really smart, Arnie.
Let's take this month, April sale. There were 60 or 70 properties listed in Dallas County. There were only 9 sales.
Okay.
Well, here's what happens to a lot of them. Number one, once the list comes out of what's for sale, there are about 25 or 26 licensed companies that will start flooding these people with flyers saying, don't lose your house, we'll loan you the money, no payment for 90 days, and all this stuff. These are licensed lenders for tax sales. And a lot of people will do that. So that diminishes the number somewhat. But then a number of them still go to the tax sale and no one bids on them because maybe it's a vacant lot. You know, for the most part, you're going to have to hold a property that you buy at the tax sale generally for at least 2 years because you can't get a title policy. So if you're getting a vacant lot, that's not producing any income. It's costing you maybe liability insurance and taxes. So a lot of people don't buy vacant lots. Maybe some builders will. But the point is that if no one bids on the house, or it could be that the minimum bid, I've seen taxes build up on a $40,000 house and they owe $30,000 in taxes. I mean, it's just incredible. And you're not going to go buy those houses. So a lot of them, no one bids on. And usually those are what they call struck off from the sale. Struck off from the sale is important to hear because now Dallas County has started saying other things like pulled from the sale. And there's a subtle difference there. If it's pulled from the sale, that means they may try to sell it again later. They may bring it up to another sale. If it's struck off, here's what that means. That means that it is taken off of the sale and it is acquired by the taxing entity that initiated the suit, the city, the county, or whatever. And they take ownership of it instead of the taxes owed. So they actually buy it. Okay. The reason they do that is so that will start the clock on the redemption period. Now, usually they cannot reduce a price on a house until the redemption period is over. And by the way, some of the redemption periods are only 6 months, but they cannot reduce it. And then the fine print says, unless all the taxing entities agree. So they can. And then every county is different in how they handle these strike-off sales. Some counties, Dallas and Tarrant County, for example, they have the different ways where, okay, during the redemption period, you can walk in and you can give us the minimum bid and take the house. But if you didn't buy it during the tax sale, why would you buy it now?
Right.
So sometimes some good ones slip in, and you can go and do that. Then they'll have sales where a sealed bid, where they'll say, okay, we've lowered the price a little bit if they can get all the taxing entities to agree. We've lowered the price, and now there's a minimum bid of this, or maybe just make any bid, and we'll consider it. Now, we won 2 bids on that kind of deal in Tarrant County last October, and we couldn't close on it till January because they had to wait for the next meeting of all the taxing entities to decide if this bid was acceptable.
Right.
So there are all sorts of things. Now, some of the counties handle those in very interesting ways. In Denton County, for example, they might say, okay, at the end of their tax sale, they say, here's the property. Last month we tried to sell it $64,000. Nobody bid on it. Anybody want it today for 64? No. Okay, how about 60? No. 55? No. 50? They'll go all the way down to $500, and everybody there knows the game, and then they start bidding up again.
Oh, wow.
So they'll wind up selling it at some price. Yeah. So some of the counties get very creative in how they handle this.
Yeah, yeah. And just to clarify, the redemption periods, at least in Texas, I think I know the answer. It has something to do with whether that was somebody's primary residence. They had a homestead exemption. Is that the difference between the redemption periods?
You were right and then wrong.
Hmm.
And most people don't know this, but you brought up a good point.
Uh-huh.
Yes. In 1992, I think is when, up to that time, it was, or 93, it was always a 2-year exemption. They changed the law and said if it's not a homestead or agricultural use, it'll only be a 6-month redemption period. But then if you read the fine print, it doesn't matter. And the case law has said, it doesn't matter if you were negligent and didn't file for the exemption or not. It's your homestead if you were living in that property as your primary residence when the lawsuit was filed. So that's a distinction. You know, a lot of people, especially new people to this, they'll go to the appraisal district and say, wow, there's no homestead exemption. It's 6-month redemption.
Right.
It's not necessarily true.
Yeah.
Now, having said that,
how do you know where the person was living at the time of they were?
Well, that's part of the research you got to do. But the reality is this: it doesn't really matter. And here's why: there's another law in the books that says anyone who was not properly notified of that sale, who had an interest in it, can contest that sale for up to 2 years. Now, usually it doesn't happen, but because that law is out there, the title companies are reluctant to give anyone a title policy, even if it's a 6-month redemption for 2 years.
Right, right.
So it really doesn't matter.
Yeah. And so the significance of that redemption period, Arnie, is that if you make repairs to the property, you may not get that money back, or is that wrong?
Well, you're at it again. It depends. It depends. That's the legal answer. It depends.
Okay.
It depends on what type of repairs you do. If you do any upgrades, you'll not get anything. If you take your countertops that are Formica, turn them to granite, no, you're not going to get it. Yeah. But anything, and here are the 3 magic words: to maintain, preserve, or safekeep the house is reimbursable plus 25%.
Okay.
For example, once you buy a house, even if the resident is the owner, once you buy it, you're not living in it. It becomes a rent house. Now we better put that up, get it up to code. Let's put the one-way deadbolts in. Let's put the peepholes. Let's do the smoke alarms, all of that.
Right.
And that's reimbursable because it's to maintain, preserve, and safekeep, including insurance.
Yeah. And would that include major expenses like an HVAC system stopped working and that needs to be replaced because you're probably not going to rent it, at least not in Texas, without AC, and the roof was damaged or is leaking, so the roof needs to be replaced? Those are significant things that are much more likely to reduce the fact that it could be redeemed because the person.
Well, not necessarily. You have to be very careful. If you do too much rehab like that, and you go over a little bit, you're right. Every one of those things are to maintain, preserve, and safekeep. They're okay. But let's say you put granite and replace the cabinets and do all this. The ex-owner can go find somebody to loan him the money to buy it for 25% if you've improved it to a greater value.
Right.
So, I'm not sure if that was the question.
Yeah. So the game really is to buy these houses, get it rent ready, kind of do the minimum at least till that redemption period's over, and then the title will be free and clear. You won't have to worry about anybody coming back. You can improve it however you want, sell it, whatever you want to do at that point. Right.
Now, that doesn't mean you have to do just minimal stuff. If the carpet's worn out, put nice carpet in there. That's okay.
Yeah.
Repaint it if it needs repainting, and you can make it nice. And depending on the price of the house, we bought one house in Plano a few months ago that we really fixed up. It was a $300,000 house, and we fixed it up nicely, and it's rented, and we spent some money on it.
Yeah, yeah. So a lot of folks that you work with, I know you have a service that you provide to help folks invest in tax sale properties. You want to tell us a little bit about how your service works, how you work with other investors, and then maybe tell us a little bit about how folks that want to learn more can get a hold of you.
Sure. I thought you'd never ask.
Yeah.
The reality is As I said, in about 2007 and 8, I kind of rededicated myself and said, let's get back in this game. And I started teaching people about tax sales. And I found that it's very convoluted. It's it's a lot of work. It really is. And a lot of people wouldn't do it. So I said, well, okay, instead of doing that, let me hold their hand. I'll start mentoring. And I would mentor people, and the same thing happened. They'll get discouraged because, you have 4 or 5 houses I'm ready to bid on in Dallas County. I'll go down there and only one of them is left on the list and somebody outbids me. That happens 2 or 3 times. You get frustrated. So 2 or 3 years ago, we made this decision. We said, look, let's just do all of the work, and we'll somebody can pay us a fee if they're successful in buying a house.
Yeah.
So that's what we did, and we developed a turnkey program, and it just blossomed because that's what people want.
Yeah.
And the big advantage for investors is they can still pursue other interests in real estate. They can still go out and flip houses with FlipNerd and do other things. And this is all passive for them because we're doing all the work.
Right.
So it enables them to get some diversification.
Yeah.
Well, then we started to enhance it even more because here's what would happen. People would call me and say, okay, I'm looking at these houses. What do you think I should bid on? Well, 4 people asked me that question. I'm going to give them the same answer.
All right.
But after a while, it kind of got to me. It's like when I was a financial planner and people want you to make their decisions for them. And I said, listen, I'll be happy to tell you what I'm going to bid, but you have to understand this. There's some educated guesses I'm making. For example, I don't know if the property you're talking about will even get to the sale. They may borrow the money. If it gets to the sale, I don't know if it's going to even, if we get outbid. I don't know if it's occupied or not.
Right.
Because sometimes the neighbors will fix up the house so it doesn't get vandalized. If it's occupied by the owner, I don't know if he wants to stay or if he wants to redeem it. If it's occupied by a renter, I don't know how much rent he's paying or how much he will pay. I don't know what the inside of the house looks like, how many repairs it needs. Therefore, I don't know what it's going to rent for, and I don't know what your cash flow is going to be. You want me to tell you what I think?
Right.
So we figured out a way to solve those problems, get rid of those unknowns. And it's like this. We buy it first. And then we go in, find the answers to all that, and then offer it to our, quote, members. So that is really done great.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Well, if folks wanted to learn more about that, how to get a hold of you, what should they do, Arnie?
Well, our website is txtaxsales.com. So
TX Tax Sales.
Yeah, It's not Texas Tax Sales. You have to put txtaxsales.com. And if you want me, my email is arnie@txtaxsales.com.
Okay.
We hold meetups once a month in the Metroplex. We have one coming up on the 19th at 1 a.m. It's a Saturday afternoon. It's right after Good Friday.
1 p.m. 1 p.m. Right?
I'm sorry, 1 p.m.
1 a.m. I don't know if anybody's going to be at that meeting.
See, you were paying attention. You passed the test. 1 p.m. The address and everything is on our website and meetup. And from 1 until about 2:30, I'm going to go over the whole thing about how tax sales work in Texas.
Okay.
Then we're going to have a little break, and then I'm going to have a very short meeting where we've got some new innovations that are going to bring tears to your eyes. They're so good.
Okay. Wow.
I mean, you're not going to believe. Anybody coming is not going to believe what we're going to reveal.
Yep.
Some of the things.
And just to clarify, a few things. You do most of your investing in Texas, but nationally, you're pretty well respected and known for how these types of things work throughout the country. So if folks want a subject matter expert, they can seek you out?
Actually, I only do Texas.
You're only doing Texas now, okay.
Yeah, there are 254 counties in Texas, and we cover all of them, so that keeps me busy enough.
Okay.
And Texas has the best fundamentals. Now, if they do want tax liens in other states, I do have some referrals I can give.
Okay.
Some of the people in other states that we work with who refer business to us as well.
Okay. And then also, just to clarify, if folks live outside of the state of Texas, where you live has nothing to do with this. If you're interested in buying properties in Texas through the tax sale channel, then they have the opportunity to work with you.
Absolutely. We have clients not only in a number of states, but in 4 different continents.
Oh, wow.
How's that?
Okay.
Antarctica is not one of them.
Okay. Awesome. Well, Arnie, definitely appreciate your time. We're going to add links down below the video for anybody that wants to get a hold of you, to get to your website, and to email you personally. So appreciate your insights. It's obviously a very niche-y area that if you're interested in learning this, certainly in the state of Texas, Arnie Abramson is your guy. Thanks for your time, Arnie.
Thank you so much. And by the way, if anybody has any questions about it, even if they want to do it on their own, I'm happy to help them.
Great. Okay. Great. One other thing I should say is you're at all the REI expos around the country. So we'll add a link down below. We've got, at this point in time, there's one in May in DC, July in Chicago, and then November in Los Angeles. Is that right?
That's correct. May 17th and 18th in Washington, D.C. at the
Gaylord?
Gaylord, thank you.
Yeah. I'll be there too, which is why I know. So
that's right. The same place they have the CPAC convention, by the way.
Okay. All right.
And Chicago, I think, in July, and it'll probably be in Orange County somewhere, October, November.
Great. And those are great events, and Arnie will be at all of them. So if you happen to be at one of those events or you want to talk to Arnie, you should come to one of those events. We'll add a link for the expo below. Would
you like my cell phone number in case anybody has questions?
We can put that on the site if you'd like, Arnie.
Okay, great.
All right.
Yep.
Well, thanks again for your time. Appreciate your info.
Well, thank you, and I enjoyed it, and thank you again.
All right. We'll be talking to you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Are you a member of FlipNerd.com, the most robust real estate investing platform in existence, where you can find off-market wholesale deals and great vendors literally in your market? You can get access to advice from experts and learn about local clubs and events right in your backyard. If not, please visit FlipNerd.com and register for a free account. You can register in less than a minute. It's pretty much the coolest site that's ever existed in the real estate investing industry, so get on over to FlipNerd.com.